Eton is either seen as a bastion of excellence, the guardian of standards in a world where everything else is declining and falling apart. That is one view. Another view is that it is a self-satisfied, complacent throwback to the past, which is elitist and damaging to the democratic prospects of the country. You take your choice. Eton is elitist in the sense that we believe in the pursuit of education, of excellence in education, doing the very best. We're not interested in the second rate, whether it's academic or sports or whatever. In that sense, I am comfortable with the term elitist. But what we should not be is exclusive in the sense of shutting people out. And a lot of what we have done over the last years, recent years, is to try and make the school more accessible to a broader range of people. So I'd be proud to stand up and say we're elitist, in the sense we stand for excellence. But I hope we're becoming more and more accessible to a wider range of people, which would be good for everyone involved. Well, Eton was founded in the year 1440 by King Henry VI. King Henry was rather a poor king in many ways, but he was devoted to the idea of his religion, but also of creating an educational foundation. And he was actually 18 years old when he founded this school, and I rather like the idea that someone so young had this idea that a place of education and worship should be woven together. He designed the school really originally as a place of pilgrimage, and that has long since disappeared. But the school that he created lives on. The original school was designed for 70 poor scholars, also with some priests who would be there. But what was interesting and unusual is from very early on it was accepted that other students could come from anywhere around the country and they would pay some money towards their education. Eton grew very quickly from that point. It's no accident that Eton is located where it is, under the walls of Windsor Castle, because of course that is where Henry, as the king, would have lived. And he could look down upon this new creation, this school and this place of worship. And that connection between the school and the royal family stayed strong, or has stayed strong, for many years. What interests me about the history of Eton is that not only is it one of the oldest schools in England, one of the 2 or 3 oldest schools, but because of its location, fairly near London, it became really quite a large school early on. And most schools in England for many, many years were very small indeed, 20 or 30 students, no more, whereas Eton had students numbering hundreds from quite early on. And certainly by the time of the 19th century was actually the largest school in England. Not just perhaps a famous school or a boarding school, but actually the largest school in England. It's not quite that now, but it is still quite a big school. And for one reason or another, it has been attractive to lots of different types of people, and has managed to have an extraordinary track record of producing boys who went on to interesting careers. 18 prime ministers of this country, for example, and people of very different opinions and persuasions as well, from artists to writers. I mean, some of my favourite writers, as it happens, were educated here, like George Orwell, the novelist, and Percy Shelley, the poet. And they tend to be of a political persuasion rather different from the more conservative element, which is part of the school as well. So it's been a very mixed and lively history, and for 565 years. Sometimes people think because Eton is a famous set of buildings and it's been around for a very long time, that the school hasn't changed much. You know, it's locked into an image of history. It is shackled to its past in some way. But actually, no institution survives for 560 years without changing all the time. And that also is to me the real interest in any institution. It's how it adjusts to different ages and different times. So, in essence, Eton is a place that's been around a long time, and it has a very strong sense of its history and tradition. But it only stays successful because it's under the surface. It's changing all the time. It is like the image of the swan, you know, the traditional image of the bird gliding on the water. On the surface it looks serene and the same, but underneath the water it's paddling away, and all the time moving and changing. And that's pretty much what life is like here.
House captains, for example, who's head of house and he gets to wear a special uniform, and in the last he sort of has a special waistcoat and a bow tie, and he apparently he's allowed to grow a beard, and he's allowed to have a goat in the housemaster's back garden. Don't ask me why. Yeah, that's the tradition apparently.
In the summer we have a day called the 4th of June, which actually is a celebration for the death of King George III, who was a king in the 18th century. Well, why on earth would you celebrate this day? He was a great supporter of Eton College, and more to the point, this king, who's most famous, King George, because he was the king when we lost the American colonies. And his prime minister at the time, who was also responsible for losing the American colonies, was a former student from Eton. So I like to get, you know, Eton has had a marked impact on the world. We lost the Americas and let them become what they became today. So it's a day of celebration, but what is nice about the 4th of June, it's a day when there are many concerts and events, but it is really an enormous picnic for all the families. Everybody comes down, and it's usually a lovely summer's day. But it has some very particular Eton events. For example, on the 4th of June we have the procession of boats. Now, Eton has a long tradition of rowing as a sporting activity and doing very well. Indeed, 2 of our boys were half the 4 that won the gold medal at the Olympics last year, or a couple of years ago. But the procession of boats is a throwback to the 18th century. It's rowed in old-fashioned boats. The boys dress up in the costume of 1800, 1790, with straw boaters and coloured shirts and lots of flowers in their hats. And they row in these old boats along the Thames at the back of the college, and at the given point they stand up in the boat. This is a difficult thing to do. 2 at a time, they stand up with their oars. You place the oar in front of you and you then stand up, and when all 8 of the boys are standing up, and the cocks as well, there is nothing to support the boat and it's moving slowly, and it's quite a feat of balance. And there are thousands of people watching this bizarre, absurd tradition. There is no point to it at all, and for that reason I love it.
There used to be such things as fagging, where older boys would basically run the house and tell younger boys what to do. So sort of mini slavery, really. And it got abolished, obviously. So you could tell any younger boy to do whatever you like for you, which obviously was abused, and it went horribly wrong. So 18th century and 19th century public schools weren't nice places. And, and someone said, what was prison like when you went there? And you said, well, I went to public school, so it was okay. Nothing compared to that.
The traditions which I think are more serious, to me at least, are those we have, for example, in the services we run in College Chapel. Eton College Chapel was built in 1482. It's one of the very early buildings, and it's a beautiful building. It is also the one place since 1482 where every single boy who was ever a student at Eton will have been at some point. And that, I think, is a powerful image for me and for our current students, knowing that. When you think of for 5.5 centuries, these young men who've gone on around the world to do all kinds of different things, they've all been in that one space, a space of gathering. Now, whether or not you are religious, and obviously it is a place designed for religious worship, but whether or not you're religious, I think you can have a profound sense of that gathering of people stretching over many years. And that, I don't think is daunting to boys, because when you're young, who cares about that kind of thing anyway? I don't think it's daunting, but it does give a kind of confidence, a sense that what all these people have done before makes everything possible. Now, if you come from an environment where people can be Prime Minister or win an Olympic medal or win a Nobel Prize, all of which have happened. I think it gives you the aspiration to believe that you can do any of these things yourself. And in that sense, I think the traditional aspect of what we do is important. The way we run our system now is that we interview and test all the students who are interested in coming at the age of 11. This is 2 years before you start. At Eton, you start age 13 and you go through to age 18. But we test at age 11. And it is open to anyone up to age 11 to register and apply. We don't look at anybody below the age of 10. In the old days, at Eton, it used to be the system that your parents put your name down for entry to the school the moment you were born. And I am not joking, 1 hour old, 2 hours old, because it was first come, first served. So if you rang up immediately, you could secure a place. You would have to pass, the child would have to pass an exam at age 13, but the place would have been secured almost from the moment, not quite the moment of conception, but not far off it, certainly the moment of birth. We have changed that system totally to make the school more open, more accessible.
And so obviously you'd have pushy parents who'd push, say, you know, work, you got to get in. And so that's how that worked. But now they've realised that some children who are booked in from the moment they're born, so they're born, parents write them down for Eton, some of them really aren't that clever. So parents push them, and it's a waste of their time.
As a parent, you may only think about Eton College for your son when he is age 9, and that's okay. Not a problem anymore. And this has had two good advantages. First of all, within England, it has made the prospect of an education at Eton open to more families. More people think about it. And it is also true of families abroad. You know, we have some Russian students here, and I don't think many Russian families would have thought of putting their son down for Eton when the son was 1 hour old. So the system has advantages in making it more a broader base, a broader mix of students, which is something we want.
So at 10 and 6 we test them, and it involves verbal reasoning, non-verbal reasoning, mathematics, English, and quickness of the mind. Basically we're checking their capabilities, not the knowledge, but their ability to think on their feet. So if they do the test well, then they're interviewed for 15 minutes on what you've just asked, extra curriculum. Tennis, football, music, singing, whatever they like doing. And the social skills are tested as well. Do they look into your eyes? Are they polite? You know, do they sit straight? Do they poke their nose or not? So all that is accumulated into a report. The test results are added to that. Then we require the headmaster of their previous school to write a special reference. And all of these 3 documents come to us and monitor their progress from then onward. At the age of 13, they sit the common entrance exams. It's all the same exams for any public school, private school. And if they pass them as well, only then they come to Eton. And then they're accepted into Eton. So all kids get a conditional place, which means only if they pass all this testing, they will be accepted. The ones you've seen in the street who wear special gowns, you know, they look like penguins, magicians, they, on top of everything I've just told you, they sit another 7 tests of much harder nature, devised from very basic to PhD standard. In all these subjects, history, English, mathematics, all 3 sciences. And if they do well there, then they're accepted into King's Scholar position, which is the most prestigious position to be in. Their education is paid for, and big companies start targeting them very early, from the age of 13.
But we have, I suppose, something of the order of about 1,000 boys, 1,000 students who will go through the application process, and we're looking in any given year for about 250. But I always maintain, as with entry to any competitive place, that someone has to be offered a place, so why shouldn't it be you?
When you first join Eton, you're always given a dictionary, a small book, with the vocabulary you have to learn as a